Trade alert. Did the Falcons just acquire a swing tackle, or did Ian Cunningham pull off a shrewd move to land a future starter?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Sirius Black, and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for 2 decades and spent one of those decades here as the illustrious host of this podcast. And on today's illustrious podcast, we are joined by Jarvis Davis of Locked On Georgia Tech and Locked On Sports Atlanta to talk maybe a little bit about some of the things that Jarvis might have spotted on Monday when he was out at Flowery Branch. And we'll get that update on, Tua's completion percentage in 11 on 11 that Jarvis has been promising the listeners all off season long. We'll be talking more about the trenches, though, right? Which is really what Jarvis's heart is at, because the Falcons made a trade on Thursday, acquiring offensive tackle Wanya Morris from the Kansas City Chiefs, putting Storm Norton on the physically unable to perform or PUP list. And we'll talk about, what does this mean for the Falcons' depth on the offensive line? But Jarvis, when you saw the news that the Falcons made a trade for an offensive tackle in Wanya Morris, I'm sure you wanted to get down on bended knee, at the end of the road. But, what were your thoughts? There's only a certain subset of the audience that understands that reference, Jarvis.
Yes,
that's for you. If you got it,
no doubt. So down on my knees, trying to beg and plead, trying to figure out why the Falcons traded for a tackle by the name of Wanya Morris. And then we found out. Then the Falcons then eventually sent out a notification that they were moving Storm Norton to the PUP. So I think that Wanya Morris is a guy who has starting capabilities, right? That's what you look for in a tackle or in a backup tackle. So I thought it was a really good move. You only get a 7th round pick. Like when you think about it from that standpoint, that's one of those deals where you have to say, hey, this is a good depth piece. This is a good addition by Ian Cunningham. Like, it seems like he has a really good grasp of this roster, because every time we get some news about something, like it's something always going to follow. You're like, oh, okay. Oh, Kaleb McGary retired. Oh, yeah. Bring on Jawaan Taylor. Okay. All right, Ian. I see. You know what I'm saying? Have a little foresight. See what's going on. I already got him in the can, trying to figure things out. So, yeah, this Wanya Morris pickup, it's a nice one. Solid pickup.
Yeah, and the terms of the trade, according to reports, is the Falcons gave up a 2027 6th round pick for Morris and are getting back Morris and a 2027 7th round pick from the Chiefs. And Jarvis, I think talked about Wanya Morris not too long ago on the podcast, because we were talking about the Falcons needing to build their offensive tackle depth, and we talked about Kingsley Suamataia, the Chiefs' 2nd round draft pick 2 years ago, that they wanted to be their long-term left tackle. That didn't work out. They wound up benching him in favor of Wanya Morris, who wound up starting, I believe, 11 games for the Chiefs in 2024 at that left tackle position, before they ultimately decided, let's have Joe Thuney play this left tackle spot through the playoffs. And
I don't know.
Saw that, as good as Joe Thuney is as a guard, one of the best guards in football, potentially a Hall of Fame type guard, kind of got exposed as a left tackle in that Super Bowl game. And we talked about how, that not having adequate answers at that offensive tackle, essentially arguably cost the Chiefs, a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl. But with Morris, obviously, performing at a certain level in that 2024 season, that was able to hold down the fort for a couple of weeks for the Chiefs, but obviously not at the level where they felt comfortable with him remaining the starter. So I think, as you say, probably more of a depth piece, but he's a young player, only 25 years old, former 3rd round pick for the Chiefs. and sort of going into a contract year in the final year of his rookie deal. So you now have two former Chiefs offensive tackle, Jawaan Taylor, and now Wanya Morris. And if Morris shows enough for the Falcons, you potentially have a sort of young offensive tackle that you can build around for the future. And, we saw the Falcons when McGary went down, bring in guys like Mike Jarrell and Carter Warren and some other guys last summer. And, those seemed like more depth, true depth piece. But I think with Morris having a little bit more experience, there is some upside that, maybe Bill Callahan could get his hands on him and turn this guy into a halfway decent starter here in Atlanta for many years to come.
And that's a thing that we beg Terry to do, right? We want to get somebody who could potentially start for you, right? Just take a gander at a third round pick. Stop going off the scrap heap to bring guys in to fill in gaps for you. And I think that, like you mentioned, with bringing back Bill Callahan coming into the fold, I think he's going to elevate some guys. Like we had a conversation on the squad show yesterday about how Matt Bertrand, whether or not he can fit in for the future, and okay, what does he look like in this gap scheme versus the wide zone? And then if you're going to continue to do the outside zone scheme and then sprinkle in a little gap, what does that transition look like for him personally and going forward? I think that you bring in a coach like that for a reason. And I think Wanya Morris is a perfect test dummy for this particular, situation going forward into the future, as far as who's going to be that guy to come in for Jake Matthews whenever he leaves or whenever he retires, because it seems like he might play for the next 4 or 5 years, because that's just how the Matthews family does it, right? Like they play very long time in the league and go on to retire and go off into the wind. But I think Morris is going to be definitely a one to look out for, because if Taylor's only on a 1-year deal, can he play right tackle? Like the guy been third round pick on this, second team, that can be something that you can get a nice little deal for if you like what you see this year, So, man, this is one of those moves where you look at it like, okay, it's shrewd. You didn't really give up. You did the pick swap, and he has starting capabilities. So, and then you pair him with a Hall of Fame type position coach. Let's see if that position coach can earn his money. Let's see if Bill Callahan can get it done.
Yeah, I think it's a low risk. I'll go medium reward, right? I don't know if you're going to get an all-pro offensive tackle or anything like that, but like
you don't need 5 all-pros. You don't.
But if you get a serviceable, I think as you pointed out, a serviceable starter on the cheap, that's a pretty solid award. That potentially saves you a draft pick down the road or something like that. So we'll see if Morris can deliver on that. Obviously, I think the immediate hole that he'll fill is at that swing tackle position. As we mentioned, Storm Norton going on the PUP list. We'll talk about that, as well as, do the Falcons, with these moves, have they solidified their offensive line depth, which was an issue last summer as we head into this summer in training camp. And we'll do that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, like this Wanya Morris trade, some of the best moves that organizations make aren't always the splashiest ones, and sometimes it's just finding the right person who fits exactly what the team needs in the right moment. And that's what stood out to me with this trade, and it's the same idea behind Indeed sponsored jobs, which help connect organization with candidates who are the right fit from the start. Finding the right person can make all the difference, and whether that's building a business or building a winning offensive line, Indeed sponsored jobs is going to help you reach the right people who actually fit what you're looking for, so you spend less time searching and more time interviewing the candidates who check all your boxes. Get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. So if you're looking for an ad-free, interruption-free experience of Locked On Falcons to get all these Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman shenanigans without any of the ads interrupting you, the Everydayer Club is for you. Start your 7-day free trial at the link in the description below at lockedonfalcons.supercast.com. So as we mentioned at the top, the reason why the Falcons made this move with Wanya Morris, as Jarvis alluded to, that quick pivot similar to the Kaleb McGary retirement, and within, I want to say, like 5 hours, we learned that Jawaan Taylor, had been signed, and now, even before the Norton news dropped, it about an hour before, we see the Morris move and that quick pivot. Obviously Storm Norton had been a guy that the Falcons had kind of picked up off the scrap heap back in 2023. Midway through that season to be their swing tackle, and really did an excellent job for the next 2 seasons in that role, with Kaleb McGary missing a handful of starts over those period of time. And, when Kaleb McGary went down last summer, it was like, oh, well, it'll be fine because Storm Norton's here, right? He'll hold down the fort, or, then it was like Storm Norton's injured. It's like, okay, well, we just need Elijah Wilkinson to hold it down for like 4, maybe 6 weeks. And then Storm Norton's going to come back. And then we found out Storm Norton ain't coming back. And now it looks like Storm Norton is definitely not coming back. And for those of you that don't know quite what the PUP list is, it basically means that a player is essentially unable to practice, and you put the player on the PUP list at this time during the summer. You can put him in June or July. It's got to be before training camp. And basically they're free to come back when they're medically cleared to practice. So at any point between now and the start of final roster cutdowns, really, the Falcons can bring Storm Norton back if he's cleared to practice, and if he isn't cleared by the start of by those final roster cutdowns and he remains on the PUP list, then he'll be forced to miss at least the first 4 weeks of the season. But Jarvis, because of last year's injury, in this situation right now, do you feel like Storm Norton's played his last snap in Atlanta?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because I think that, as long as Wanya Morris is able to stay healthy, they can bring him back on a cheap deal to be the swing tackle going forward, right? If they want to get super young at their right tackle spot, or they can put him on a deal to where it makes sense for him, and then go out and get a young guy to be your swing tackle, or just go back on the scrap heap and find another veteran swing tackle, because that's just kind of how it works. So, it's unfortunate because, like I said, when Storm got an opportunity to get on the field, he was pretty solid. So, really didn't even barely know a difference, but definitely in the run game.
Yeah.
In the run game, Kaleb was, you definitely saw a little bit of a drop off there. But overall, though, you thought he did a really solid job of just stepping in for a guy who we were used to, kind of being in there and being that mauler type right tackle. So, yeah, this is one of those instances where you have to look at it and say, all right, you were counted on to come back. Everybody had all this hope in the world. Like, oh, yes, man, Storm coming back. Elijah Wilkinson hold it down. It did, then Elijah Wilkinson had to hold it down for the whole season. Then this man go out like Tupac. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, calling everybody out, calling everybody sorry, so, man, like, we don't want to be in no situation like that, having to depend on the guy like that. So yeah, I definitely don't see the Falcons, re-signing him, and man, who knows if he's been hurt for this long, he's not able to practice at this point, and he was supposed to be back at the beginning of last season. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this man hanging them cleats up, man.
Yeah, it does feel like we're trending in that direction. We'll see if we get an update on what his status is moving forward. At least the PUP list does leave that door cracked for you to come back, as opposed to if they were like, oh, we're putting him on IR, and it's like, oh, he's done. Okay. So we'll see on that front. But this gets us to the conversation about the offensive line depth, right? And we saw the Falcons draft Ethan Onyanwa in the 7th round, another sort of project tackle. as you mentioned, some of these guys who like Jack Nelson last year in the 7th round, trading for Mike Jarrell last year as well. We saw them pick up a couple of UFL guys or whatever, or no, maybe not UFL guys, but a couple of guys out of the rookie minicamp back in May as well at guard and whatnot. And so you're seeing this team kind of rework this offensive line depth. And last summer, after those preseason games, Jarvis, when we were doing all the postcasts, doing those hour-long postcasts, and felt like 45 minutes of those, each one was just complaining about how bad the second string offensive line was.
Offensive line is cheeks. Doesn't need to play NFL football. Why is this man still on this roster?
It was tough. It was tough. It was a tough watch.
Yes, sure.
And sort of, it'll be interesting. I feel like there's some room for optimism with moves like this, like a Wanya Morris trade that, they've hopefully solidified it, but it still, I think, remains a big question, so I'm wondering, Jarvis, how big a question right now is at least the second string offensive line to you as we gear up for training camp?
I think one of the things that you have to look at is you want to get a good mixture of vets. Like, I think Mike Jarrell can add some value, man, because let me back up. I think that we're starting to see this transition of what these offensive, or what we used to seeing these offensive linemen look like in Falcons uniforms, because Michael Jarrell ain't no little dude. Ethan Onwua is not a little guy,
Good job, Jarvis.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, man, you're working on it, baby. We on it, baby. We on it. You know what I'm saying? So those guys aren't necessarily built like what we're used to seeing. Like, we used to seeing 6'4", 6'5", 305, 310. These cats 330, 335. Depending on what day of the week it is. I think we're going to start to see this transition to more gap scheme, field type offensive linemen. And I think that, this is the perfect time to do it because, like you said, last year it didn't look good, and it showed throughout the entire season last year when all these injuries started happening at that right tackle spot. So for me, man, I'm cool with them kind of getting the guys that they want in the door. And the guys are starting to look a little different because that just let me know that Bill Callahan is going to start put his stamp on his offensive line, and I think it's going to look a lot different than what it has looked in years past.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about a bunch on this podcast over the last several weeks and months. I think this offensive line room, so much of the last 3, 4, 5 years, you could say, have been about, let's just maintain this group of players. Let's let Dwayne Ledford get his guys in there, and we'll master this one thing. And now you're at this kind of transition point where you're trying to bring in some new blood, some different body types, tweak the scheme. We've discussed this before. It's like this offensive line is built to be a wide zone team. So if you're smart, you're not going to necessarily throw it completely out the window because that's what they do well. And, you play to win the game, as a coach once said. And, asking Jake Matthews to try to move, D tackles and whatnot, 5 yards off the ball, you're not playing to Jake Matthews' strengths, right?
No. Exactly.
And so I think this is going to be an interesting inflection point because it does feel like there's going to be significant change in the future for this offensive line at some key positions. And so much of this season is just kind of about, okay, who's going to be around? Like, we can sit here and say Chris Lindstrom's going to be around, but if Jake wants to keep playing football, Jake's going to probably be around. And there's a ticking clock on that, but Jarvis, I'm not mentally or emotionally prepared to let go of Jake Matthews at this point. So
I understand. I just need to have a plan. I need to have a plan.
I agree. There's got to be a plan. You can't just be like, oh, well, Jake's going to play forever, right?
Right. Can't leave that up to him. Like he's gonna play. Yeah. So,
but like everything else is kind of in flux with this offensive line.
Yep.
And so much of this year is just, as you mentioned, with Matthew Bertrand and Ryan Newsom, Jawaan Taylor, now Wanya Morris, and some of these other young pieces that they've added. It's like, go out there and show you're going to be around. We can build around, because with all the draft capital that, this Falcon team is going to have starting next year, they're going to have the flexibility potentially to invest, some of those premium picks in the offensive line and bring in the type of guys that they truly want to sort of build around, as we've seen a number of teams do when they go out there and, not only spend money, because the Falcons going to have a lot of cap space, but also have those draft picks. So I think that's really what these next few months in training camp are going to be, and watching these guys in the preseason. And then obviously how these guys perform in the regular season, I think is going to be pivotal. But there's a lot of potential for change coming for this offensive line after pretty much no change for these last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think that it was a good model. Like it's not to anything to mourn over, because like having Dwayne Ledford in there and getting guys in the door who didn't necessarily have any real expectations of being starters, and then see those guys being groomed into starters. You got a UDFA and Ryan Newsom giving you some good time. Drew Dahlman, going from who? His daddy played in the league. Oh, okay, all right, we know what it's about. And then going to a $15 million a year, contract with the Chicago Bears. Like that's the type of stuff that you want. Now, Bill Callahan, I ain't gonna say he ain't on no 4 or 5 year plan. I don't think, So I think that if you are building this up to match up with what you want to do on offense, like I think this is gonna have to be a Kevin Stefanski type vision as to what he wants his offensive lineman to look like, which I feel is what Bill Callahan wants them to look like. We just don't know who's going to be around for the long haul, or however long Kevin Stefanski is the head coach. So yeah, I think this is going to be good. It was good, that outside zone wide scheme, Dwayne Ledford, that was good, man. So yeah, I want to see it again. I want to see guys coming in with mid to low expectations and figuring out a way to build those guys up so you can save some money on the cap, because all these premium players, man, that price going up, Jack. So you're gonna have to figure out a way to find some cheap labor to be one of those 22 guys on the field for you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So we'll see what's what with that. But Jarvis, you were at the branch earlier this week, and I'm curious, to get your update on the practice report of Tua and the completion rates, or more seriously, if there were any things that you scoped out on Monday that you want to share with the listeners. We'll do that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So, Jarvis, anything you saw or heard on Monday when you were at Flowery Branch that you want to share with the listeners that you think is notable?
The thing that really stood out to me, or one of the things that really stood out to me, was the fact that I know you guys talked about this on the Falcon squad. I really look at this linebacker core, outside linebacker, stack linebacker, man, and I really started to question whether or not Troy Andersen and or JD Bertrand are going to make this team. Like that, and they were right there wearing the little jerseys, walking around and not practicing and all that stuff. I started looking at the guy. I started looking at Channing Tindall. I started looking at Samson Ebicam, and started looking at Christian Harris, and I was like, oh, started looking at all these numbers, man, all these linebackers. I know some of those guys are edge players too. Azeez Ojulari, I'm like, oh man, this linebacker room is loaded, man. Like whether it be edge or stack linebacker. I don't, and just from a JD Bertrand perspective, he's a special teams guy. But he had to be taken off of special teams last year because he was just that bad. And Channing Tindall is a special teams guru. He's a man. He's a man. He knows what to do on special teams. Because coming from those 316 up 316, man, down there in Athens and little A, hey, they play special teams. So I just look at it, man, from a standpoint of like that was the thing that just really just stood out to me. I started looking at those guys and started looking at that group, and just from a number standpoint, I was just like, man, I don't know how Troy Andersen and JD Bertrand are gonna make this roster.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat with you. When I did my 53-man roster projection in mid-May, I did not have Troy Andersen or JD Bertrand on the roster. Now, it did come down to the wire for me with Troy and Braylon Trice, kind of for that last spot. I was like, going back and forth. Yeah, and so I was just like, well, how many more, this is it for Braylon Trice. This is it for Troy Andersen, right? So it's like flip a coin, and it came up heads, and so Braylon Trice makes the roster. But you're right with JD Bertrand. His path to making the 53-man roster is going to be on special teams, and as you mentioned it, at a certain point last year, the Falcons were like, yeah, he's not bringing a whole lot on special teams, and then you bring in Channing Tindall, who that's what he's majored in the NFL. Sure. You bring in someone like Harold Perkins, who brings a lot of speed and juice and was an ace special teams player when he was a freshman. Freshman All-American, all the accolades he got then. And certainly when you have a guy with that type of speed, that's an asset on special teams. You bring in a young player like Kendall Daniels, who also brings a lot of size and speed. Special teams is one of those things, Jarvis, over the years, I've noticed over the years with a lot of folks where they always just kind of assume, well, it's like, oh, well, if he can't play on offense or defense, you just put him on special teams. And my thing is like, it's not just put the bums on special teams.
No,
right?
No.
Special teams is really where, like, if you can run and hit, you can play on special teams. But the bigger you are, the faster you are, is very valuable on special teams. And just putting the 5'11", 220-pound linebacker with 4.7 speed, while that guy can work on special teams if he knows what he's doing. Give me the 6'5", 240-pound guy that runs, a 4.4 or whatever, and that's going to make even a bigger difference on special teams. And I think you're right with the upgrade that the Falcons have made with the speed element and the size element at that linebacker position. It's why I say, like, if Troy Andersen is healthy, there's still a spot for him in that role because he has the size, he has the speed, but Troy Andersen ain't been healthy for 3 years. It's been a while. So at this point in time, until he shows up and says I'm back and kicks in that door, which I'm not going to hold my breath on it, and I know you're not going to. There's not a whole lot that you can count on with those two guys, and it does feel like the Falcons made an effort to shift that room this offseason. And I'm happy they did, because it's been such a problem area that not only the depth on defense with all the injuries they've had at linebacker these last couple of years, the lack of speed that has been exposed far too often at that position, but also as we talked about all season last year, the struggles of the special teams units, and getting guys that not only have potential upside to contribute on defense down the road, but can immediately carve out an impact in the third phase of the game, I think is a huge positive for the Falcons this offseason. And that linebacker core, I think, really embodies it.
Yeah, man. And you think about how many games did the Falcons have they lost on special teams just over the past 3 years? Like, it's just awful. It's just, how they've been in so many games and based off of just kickoff. Simple thing is kickoff coverage. Not being able to stay in your lane and make a doggone tackle. You get out of your lane, one guy gets out of his lane, then the other guy is overcompensating for that guy, And then next thing you know, shoot, they hit that thing the right way, then they go into the house. Or you get field position to be able to get in position, doggone kick a game with a field goal. Those are the type of the things that just can't happen. And I don't think my man Craig is gonna be looking, oh yeah, I'll take all the bombs, give me all of them, I work with them. No, it don't work like that, dog. That man got to keep his job too, because the special team unit has to be better. It has to be better this year. So yeah, that's why I say, man, those guys are gonna be. They're gonna be in the fight for their life to make this doggone roster for sure.
Yeah. So we will see what's what. Obviously, all that will play out in training camp. But between now and then, we got Mandy Minnie, Jarvis's girl from high school, and that's coming up next week. So obviously, the big story is going to be.
Her name Mandy.
I didn't say it was girlfriend. She just sat next to you in math class. That's all. That was your girl. You copied her notes. That's all. You're a classic football jock. You needed the notes.
So many stories, but we don't have time for those right now. Sorry.
And so obviously the big story is going to be, does James Pierce report? If you missed it on the Falcons Squad show, we touched on the possibility maybe the Falcons cancel mandatory minicamp. We'll see.
No, the Rams just did it.
I know. This is everybody's doing it.
When Sean McVay does it, everybody think it's cool. If it's cool with Sean McVay can do it. Oh man, we good. Yeah, we shutting this thing down, dog. We good. Yeah. We're gonna take a rest. Myles Garrett, man, but don't even worry about it, bro. We'll see you at the end of July, dog. Yeah, man. I won't be surprised, dog. I won't be surprised at all.
So we'll keep an eye on if we get a shutdown, that they wrap it up and let's head to training camp. So we'll see on that front. So obviously one more week of, practice before we take that break for training camp. So continue to check out Locked On Falcons to get the latest updates on that. And of course, if you never miss an episode, the Everydare Club is for you. Ad-free version of Locked On Falcons, members only Discord access, some sweet Locked On merch, as well as other perks. And you can find it all and start your 7-day free trial at the link in the description at lockedonfalcons.supercast.com. Guys, it is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.